got to imagine it was a busy weekend for you. Lots to discuss in Leafs Nation with everything that went down last week with Brendan Shanahan announcing that Kyle Dubas would not return as general manager and giving us sort of a play-by-play of how that ultimately came to be. What have you heard over the weekend about the fallout from all of this?
Well, I think, Jackie, I think we're going to get to the point where we start to move on a little bit. I mean, obviously, I think everybody was in shock, people in the organization, people out of the organization. You know, like even though Kyle Dubas had his media conference last week where he talked about, how his family felt about the entire situation, he was in the office the rest of the week. He was running meetings. I think a lot of his staff took that as a sign that he was going to stay. On Friday, just hours before it was announced that he was leaving, there were rumors going around the league that he told his staff that he was going to stay. So that's how crazy it was. And I think people just had to wrap their heads around what happened. I mean, look, the Toronto Maple Leafs clearly wanted Kyle Dubas to be their GM until early last week, and it fell apart at the end of the week. So I think people were surprised. Well, now, the Maple Leafs are starting a search for their next general manager. Kyle Dubas, the Pittsburgh Penguins have permission to talk to Kyle Dubas about their open hockey operations spot. And I think we're going to start to see everybody move on, but there's no question that this sent shockwaves through Toronto and the league, and now we're all still waiting to see where everything's going to land.
Elliot, I thought your comment last week, I guess when all this happened after the Shanahan press conference, talking about the job in Toronto, everybody's going to come out of the woodwork. And I mean, when you said that, I just started laughing at myself because I'm like, everybody is literally going to come out of the woodwork to try to get that job, I would imagine. But is there any update over the weekend in your conversations? Were there any other names that you're hearing that might make sense?
Brian, what are you doing next week? Are you around? Just out of curiosity.
I'm not getting involved in this soap opera.
No comment from Brian. Don't talk to my client like that, Elliot.
I think the first name we all know of that they have permission to speak to is Brad Treliving from Calgary, and I do think he's going to be I think he's going to be a major person of interest in this search. The one thing I think that we have to figure out here, really, to be honest, EJ, is it's going to be that if you come to Toronto, you're not going to have the ultimate decision-making authority. That remains in Brendan Shanahan's hands. So I think that the question is, the one thing about Treliving is he worked in Calgary under the late Ken King. He worked in Calgary with Brian Burke. He worked in Calgary with the owner there, Murray Edwards. These are all big personalities. So I think he's somebody that can handle that. I think the other question is going to be, look, if you come to Toronto and you know that this is the way it is, are you going to be okay with that? Are you going to be someone who can work in those parameters? So I think that's in sort of that's the first kind of thing we're looking at here. Shanahan himself said experience. I have wondered about somebody like, Marc Bergevin. Bergevin didn't enjoy dealing with the pressure of the Montreal fishbowl and media market at the end, so I don't know if that's 100% a fit, but I do think he's the kind of guy that could work under that kind of structure. So I think that's going to be the question is, who's going to be comfortable with that? Who's going to be comfortable with the fishbowl? And who's going to come into a roster where you're going to have to make some big decisions? So I think Treliving is the first name. We're going to start chasing the rest of them, but I think that's kind of what we're looking at.
I don't want to make this whole conversation about the Maple Leafs, but I am going to continue it. Just one question further. I think it's important, Elliot, that I ask about Auston Matthews. And if you've learned anything about how this could potentially impact his contract negotiations. He's only got 1 year left on his deal, a no move that kicks in July 1st. Have you learned anything new about maybe how Auston Matthews feels about all of this?
I think we're still kind of determining all of that, Jackie. I do believe, and I've said this many times, I do believe that Auston Matthews' first choice is to stay in Toronto. I think that my guess into the reading of the situation was he was going to sign a midterm deal at a very big number. It would probably be the largest AAV in the NHL. That would allow him to sign another contract when he's 30 or 31 years old and still in very much the prime of his career. And I do believe that his first choice is to stay in Toronto. Now, I think this, I was talking on our podcast today, I think I don't know that he was going to sign by July 1st. And I think that will force the Maple Leafs at least to have a conversation about what that means for them. I don't know if he's going to sign by July 1st. I think if Dubas was here, I think the team would have bet very confidently that, like Pastrnak in Boston, they would have kept him and believed that they could re-sign him. So I think that was kind of the way that they were going to approach it. I think now it's not that I think he'll run away because Dubas isn't here. I think what it does is it puts a hold on the situation because he has to build a relationship with whoever the new manager is, and also he has to hear what the plan is. So I just think that the Maple Leafs have to be prepared for the fact that he may not sign and probably won't sign by July 1st. And what does that mean for them going into next season? I think I still do think his first choice is to be a Maple Leaf. I just don't know how much this changes. Maybe it changes how quickly that could happen, but I would never say, without talking to Matthews directly, it means it's impossible.